Hi, we are here live, hoping that countdown worked out well. How is everyone doing? Give everyone a chance to join the live chat here. I'd love to know where everyone is tuning in from. Sacha, you are in England.
I am. I'm about an hour and 10 north of London.
Oh, nice. I'm still here in Toronto, desperately waiting for winter to be done. So let us know where you're coming from. And yeah, I'm really excited to be here. Thanks for everyone for kind of sticking with us, and apologies for the quick change. But really excited to chat to Sacha today. So let us know if you have any questions in the chat, and I will pick them up throughout. So we got people rolling in from New York, from DC. Sacha specific hi from Katie Dunback. So those are coming through there. So I wanted to give you an introduction, as is due, Sacha. So bear with me. I will read all of these things out. So Sacha Black is a best-selling author, rebel podcaster, and professional speaker. 5 obsessions of hers are words, expensive shoes, conspiracy theories, self-improvement, and breaking the rules. Sacha writes books about people with magical powers and other books about the art of writing. When she's not writing, she can be found laughing inappropriately loudly, sniffing musty old books, fangirling film and TV soundtracks, or thinking about new ways to break the rules. She lives in Cambridgeshire, England, with her wife and genius giant of a son. Has that captured absolutely everything?
It certainly has. Yeah, I think so.
Welcome. I'm so happy to get to chat to you. If you haven't listened to the Rebel Author podcast, you absolutely should. And it's been a delight to have you here in person. So you're in a pretty unique position as an indie author, podcast host. With lots of industry experts that come onto your podcast that you get to chat to. And then you're also involved in the Alliance of Independent Authors. So I'm just sort of wondering if you had to describe the indie publishing industry to somebody that's never heard of it before, how would you describe that?
Oh, it's such an interesting question. I think I would describe it as all the naughty kids publishing the books that they really want to publish that the big bosses said they couldn't. And I suppose I have to say it like that because that's my angle as a rebel and someone who likes to be naughty. That's probably how I would describe it. But really, for me, being an indie is about empowerment and about freedom and about doing it our own way, and that is at the heart of being a rebel for me. I know, rebellion spans so many different areas, but for me, it is empowerment and freedom. And it is us being able to publish the stories that are in our hearts, that we don't have to adhere to. Well, I mean, of course, we want to adhere to certain tropes to please our readers, but also we get that ideal situation where we can see what readers want and we can understand the market, we can move quickly, and then we can also Venn diagram that with all of the things that are in our hearts and our souls and make us creatively happy.
Nice. I really love that angle that, yeah, of course, got to get the rebel in there, but that you get to just write kind of what you're really interested in. And have you found yourself, do you shift the genre of your writing at all, or as it takes your fancy, or do you kind of tend to stick to one place?
So I've always written nonfiction right from the start because I am a perpetual student, and if I don't write stuff down, I don't remember it. So I write down all the lessons and they end up in books because that's what I do. I write books. But yes, actually, funnily enough, I have gone through a sort of personal awakenment over the last year. And I am moving from young adult into queer young adult writing and queer young adult books, because as a queer woman, I finally for the first time started reading queer literature last year, and I was like, whoa, why am I having such an emotional response to all of these stories? And it was a real duh moment for me. But yeah, I am changing my genre. I do think if you are a newer writer, it is probably better for you business wise in terms of growing your business to stick with one genre until you have 3 to 5, probably 5 books, I would say, because then you have the ability to discount and do deals and grow your audience that way. But Yeah, I think if you're in this business for a really long time, it would surprise me if you didn't change genre at some point, because, you know, we all grow and develop and have new things that we get interested in.
Yeah, I like that idea of like having a couple of books in one genre at least before you move forward. But I guess it's always about trying to build that base of readers when you're starting out, for sure. So it's sort of my second question kind of leads into what you were just saying. I think that content creation just seems really like key to the world in 2022, especially kind of with the state of publishing in general, content creation kind of going outside of publishing. But do you think people are reading and consuming more than ever before? Or do you think that there's more, as you were saying, you're moving to more genres, like, are we expanding the genres that are there and people that maybe potentially hadn't read are reading? Like,
I think it is a bit of both. So I think that by the very nature of our world becoming more individualized and people feeling more empowered because lots more things are more acceptable, more niches are popping up. And so you'll get these nuanced niches that just explode. And then sometimes they become a genre in and of themselves. Like take billionaire romance, for example. Until 50 Shades of Grey, there wasn't really, I mean, there were a few, but it wasn't really a hot trend. And then 50 Shades of Grey came, and then it exploded and it became like a hot niche, like a market niche, and now it's its own genre. So yeah, I do think that just by the very nature of like how our world is developing and our culture is, you know, accepting more and more nuances. Yeah, these new genres are coming, and I definitely think that people are consuming more as well, and that was in part, you know, because of the last 2 years. I certainly doubled the amount that I read. So I used to read 50, 60 books a year. Now I read 120 plus.
oh my God.
Yeah. And I think, but it's interesting. I think part of that was about the lockdowns and the fact that, you know, I didn't have anything else to do in the evenings. Who wants to talk to their family? I'm really joking. But, you know, the other part of it is because there are books now coming out that I'm even more invested in. So like queer literature is definitely becoming more mainstream. There's more options, and therefore I am consuming more because it's there and because I can. So I think it's a bit chicken and egg, really. I think some of it is societal changes, some of it is, you know, the last couple of years, and then other aspects are because indies have that ability to write things that whatever they want without having to get permission from gatekeepers. And so we're putting these niches onto the market, and some of them are exploding.
Yeah, and I think we see that especially as like even categories expanding, like that can be so key to like these different genres. I think there was an article I saw shared somewhere that about like a LGBTQIA kids category being added, and just like why that's really important. So I would say if you're an author that has been publishing for a while, like maybe if you started out a few years ago, I'd go back and see what categories are available, because we might have been able to pinpoint like a key part of your book, and that would be better serving your readers rather than having like romance general, you know, everything gets lost in there. So I definitely think go and have a look and see what's available. But there's also more that should be added, I think. I don't know how you're finding it with what you're writing in. Do you think it's fully kind of covered in how it's represented?
No, I would love to see more granularity, because so if we just take where I'm going now specifically, which is young adult LGBT fiction, it is bracketed as sort of young adult LGBT fiction issues or literature on young adult LGBT issues, and that's about it. And just because of the way the market is, there are a disproportionate number of books for gay male teens, and then I would say the next most popular section is for transgender teens, and then it is a sort of queer women, lesbians, bisexual fiction. And so that is such a small niche. It's actually quite hard to pull those, because that's kind of where I'm going, but it's quite hard to pull those books out. And it has taken a lot of sort of crawling the categories on Kobo, on all of the different stores, and, you know, trying to read blurbs and look inside and actually understand what the representation is in all of those books, just because everything's lumped into about 5 different, I think it's 5 categories I wrote down. It's funny enough, I was actually looking at this yesterday, 5 or 6 across the different stores. That there's just a handful of categories really.
Richard has a question about like, do you have a suggestion for a hetero reader in queer fiction? I mean, my suggestion would just to be read queer fiction, but I don't know if you have anything else to add, Sacha.
I suppose it depends what the question is. Are you asking because you want to include more diverse characters? Are you asking, is it young adult that you want to read? Is it adult that you want to read? Because that, you know, there's lots and lots of different stuff. Yeah, I would ask for more detail. I can give you some specifics. Yeah.
Sure, no problem. So like we have a direct line to our questions here. It really feels like authors have a direct line to their readers. And this is even outside of indie authors. You see sort of authors being able to engage with their readers much more than before. What do you think are the pros and cons of this for you that you've found?
So I think one of the best ways to grow your readers is by building a community. In times over the last 2 years, I think that has been even clearer to me than ever before, that because we've been so separated from each other, we are all clinging to each other even more, which means there's a lot more people much more willing to pluck up the courage to join communities or to comment or to friend people or like things or share things. And I think if you, like, as a indie author, you have the power to reply to someone's comment or tag, you know, you can use those, you can put out content that is relevant to your genre, to your types of books, to the tropes that you include. You can create community groups, you can do read-alongs, you can, you know, share other books that are like yours or have tropes like yours. And these, this kind of content, like sharing the stuff that you like that's in your genre that other readers will like, it's so fast how you can build a community. And then, like, naming people as well, like giving people a hook to belong to. So
yeah, like your rebels.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Exactly. So, you know, we are rebel authors, and so I always start my podcast, Hello Rebels. I have a rebel Facebook group, a rebel author Facebook group. These things connect us either with fellow authors or they connect us with our readers. And honestly, like, building a community around your fiction or around your non-fiction has been one of the most significant impacts, I would say, on my income and my sales.
Nice. And what about the cons that you think about that?
Oh,
Is
yes.
it maybe the extra time involved? I'd imagine.
Yeah, I think the biggest one probably is time. But that doesn't come for a while, right? So you for a long time, you're slogging and you're trying to get that engagement and you're trying to build that community. And then there is a tipping point where, you know, you become so busy that you can't necessarily reply to everything. And I think you also have to learn the balance between being open and honest and authentic and too much transparency and too much vulnerability shared. And you still have to keep back pieces of yourself for you as well, I think. And everybody has different levels at which they are comfortable sharing. And so you have to learn that boundary for yourself, I think. But that can be a hard one. Sometimes I don't get it right. But yeah, you know, it's like a constant learning process.
I think that's a good point, I think, for anyone on the internet, I think, as well, but especially for your main kind of motivation in business being this directness, that you do not want to put your whole self out there. Yeah, you want to save a little bit of yourself for yourself and for your family. Richard has given us sort of an expansion there on the question that he was having. I think maybe the best thing to answer is, like, he was saying, what queer fiction is best if the person also wants non-queer characters. But how about we ask Sacha, what is your favorite queer authors? Who do you love reading?
Okay, so a book I read and absolutely, like, cried laughing this year is called Fresh by Margot Wood, and it's set in somebody's freshman year of college, and what I found fascinating is that the author is very open about the fact that she has ADHD. And so the protagonist has ADHD, and she has written it using sort of footnotes and things jump all over the place, representing a sort of ADHD mindset and sort of processes that they go through. And it's fascinating. It's also hilarious. And there are some sexcapades, shall we say, that happen. So yeah, that's one. What else have I loved? Anything by TJ Klune. So he wrote House in the Cerulean Sea, was one of my favorite. House in or House on the Cerulean Sea, I can't quite remember, but anyway, that was one of my favorite books from last year. Sort of magical realism, kind, sort of semi-set in our world, semi-set 1984 sort of meets Umbrella Academy, I would say. And it was just, they had some of the cutest, most hilarious characters. Is 2 enough?
Yeah, loads. Yeah. I think that's great. Okay. I'm adding those to my growing to read list. So I don't think I can take on more than 2. So that's great. I wanted to ask you about like the Rebel Author podcast. I feel like this question is a bit too general and a bit too hard, but was there one piece of advice that you kind of, or maybe you didn't even realize that you were seeking advice like from an interview in the podcast, or is there something that really stands out to you from like all the conversations that you've had?
I think the biggest shift that has happened for me was when I got to learn about Becca Syme. So Becca Syme runs the Better Faster Academy for writers, and she has, I don't know how many years, a lot of years of experience with the Clifton Strengths. And I got to interview her on the podcast, and I have since sort of studied her courses and her coaching, and Clifton Strengths have really helped me learn who I am as a person and how I can apply my strengths to my writing and my business. And it's like mindset shifts, it's process shifts, things that I didn't realize, like all kinds of stuff. But yeah, I would say Becca Syme and Clifton Strengths has changed my life.
Oh, awesome. Big fan of Becca Syme here. We also had her on this before. So if you're interested, you can go back and watch the chat that we had with her. I mean, even as I feel like I just sort of steal advice from you guys as a non-author, but I found them really helpful, like the mindful stuff with Becca. She's so wonderful.
She is absolutely amazing. Like, and just I could wax lyrical about her for like literally days. She has changed my life. So yeah.
Oh, nice. So let's go back a little bit and talk about, if you were an indie author that was starting out today and like looking to build a business, where do you think that somebody should start?
Okay, so the one thing that I always regret not having done sooner was a reader magnet. So a reader magnet is basically it could be anything. It could be a short story, it could be a whole book, it could be a novella, it could be an extra epilogue. It is something, a story or a piece of something that you want to give to potential readers in exchange for their email address. And even before starting your mailing list, because you can start a mailing list, but it's very hard to get people to join unless you're willing to give them something. So I would say a reader magnet, number one, then a mailing list. I would say to stick to one genre for as long as you can. I know there are lots of people out there who like to flip-flop, but it depends. If you can write really fast, great. You could do 5-10 books in a year and then swap genre. If you are not a fast writer, then I would say stick to one genre, as I've mentioned. Little things like have a separate business bank. Like, it doesn't need to be a paid business bank account, because lots of business accounts cost money. You could just set up a new current account. But if you don't separate out your money, trust me when I tell you, it is a pain in the bottom at the end of the tax year when you have to pull out those transactions. You do not want to be me. You do not want to do that. So set up a separate current account, or whatever to keep those transactions clear. And then I think the other thing that's even like probably one of the most important things marketing wise at the moment is to understand your market, understand everything. You need to know everything about your market. This is the biggest mistake I made with my first series, is that I just wrote the books that I wanted to write rather than analyzing the market. So what do I mean by that? I mean going into your category and your sub genres, and in fact knowing the categories and subgenres that you're going to write in. Loads and loads. I can't tell you how many people come to me and say, oh, well, it's a bit of this genre and it's a bit of that genre. And I'm like, this is not the way to be. So yeah, pick a genre, pick a niche within that genre, and then go and learn absolutely everything you possibly can. Keep a track of who is in the top 10, who is in the top 100 for, days, weeks, months before your release. Read books in that genre. Understand things like, are there particular tones that they use? Are there, what is the style of the writing? Is it clean and crisp? Is it more luxurious and full of description? What are the common themes in there? Are the stories always about relationships? Are they always about magic or a particular type of magic? Are there particular tropes you see reoccurring? At the moment, enemies to lovers is like everywhere. So but that is also contained to certain genres. What else about the books? So points of view. Is it first person? Is it third person? I nearly said last person then. Is it past tense?
Create a new point of view.
I know, right? You want to know, like, what are the common colors on book covers in your genre? What are the patterns? Are there people on the covers? Is it photo manipulation? Is it illustration? Who are the popular authors? What are those authors doing on their social media? Are there particular topics that are covered? So, like, for example, with LGBT fiction, it is slightly more political than other genres because, understandably, we don't have equal rights everywhere. And so there are certain things, people have to come out. That can be it can be hard to do that. And so there are certain topics and certain political themes that often come up in those books that don't necessarily in other books. So know your market.
So much good advice there. Honestly, we should write down all of the bullet points that you just mentioned. That's really good. I had a couple of questions that came out from that. Well, one note that I think the knowing your genre is so key, because if you as an author can't really, like, I know an elevator pitch is not something you'll never be in an elevator having to pitch something, probably. But like, I think that as an idea of something, being able to like summarize your story and say what genre it's in, like, if you're not able to describe it, how is the reader really going to be able to know that that's what they want to read?
But the interesting thing about that is the way that we are describing stories as indies has changed, right?
Oh,
so
tell me more about this.
Well, so Jennifer Lynn Barnes did a talk for Romance Writers of America about writing for your id. And then we have had kind of an expansion on that. Obviously, tropes are really kind of hot property in terms of everybody's talking about tropes. What are tropes? I've even seen books coming out now on tropes. And then we had Theodora Taylor's amazing book on universal fantasy.
Yeah.
And I think I am seeing a shift in how people are writing blurbs and how people are writing sales copy. Before that, it was all about the tagline. It was all about, so we had like taglines being really important. And then Brian Meeks sort of came in and everybody started playing with structure and white space and abusing grammar, basically, in order to force people's eyes to read down. And now I think we've got another shift where people are starting to use universal fantasy and tropes in their blurbs, and like intentionally stuffing particular like words that appeal to your id or appeal to like your deepest fantasies in blurbs. And so I think there is another shift in the market now, and I think it's very clever, because I'm like, oh, I know, I want that book now, like in a way that I never used to know. So yeah, indies are awesome.
Maybe this makes me sound so silly, but what's an id? Can you describe that?
And I'm going to get it completely wrong, which is wildly embarrassing, as I have a degree and a master's in psychology, but basically like the id, the ego, and the something or other else. And it's basically like the lusty gut bit inside you where, I don't know, it's the non what is the word? Where we react subconsciously to things that we
right.
You can't help.
Yeah, you're not using your brain. Okay, that makes sense for sure. But yeah, I'm gonna have a look out for some of the blurbs and see. I definitely think that that's it's always interesting to change it up. And the taglines I have to say, like for clean metadata, like a lot of retailers don't love the tagline that's kind of like selling your movie version of the book, you know? So always using the description field in a more, I would say SEO optimized, but the O is optimized, but just making sure that it really is like appealing. Yeah, I think that's a really interesting trend. Yeah, I'm going to keep an eye out. One other thing you mentioned about the reader magnet. Have you ever changed up your reader magnet, or like how do you like?
Yeah, I've trialed and errored a few things.
Okay.
From maps, giving away bonus stories, giving away character interviews. I have done and then on the nonfiction, I've done cheat sheets. I've done like extra checklists and stuff for people who've read books. I've done mini video courses. I've done loads of different stuff.
Nice.
Yeah.
So it's just trial and error for everything to try and see.
Yeah. Ultimately, so I spoke to Tammy Labreck on who wrote Newsletter Ninja recently on the podcast, and what she said I thought was fascinating, because she said it doesn't necessarily have to be a full book, although of course most people find that full books do give the biggest return in terms of like converting clicks. But she said, you know, if there is something that your readers would absolutely love. So for example, in the last book in the trilogy that I've just finished, one of the characters writes a journal during the book, but you never see it's sort of mentioned like an Easter egg that they're doing this, and you never see any of the content or know what it is that they're writing. But I've actually written the journal.
Oh,
so
cool.
Yeah, so if you've gotten to the end of the trilogy, of course you're going to want to know, because it's an Easter egg that's been sewn through the series. You're going to want to know what's in that. So that things like that, like what is it that you can give your reader that they would most want at the end of that novel? If it's a romance, maybe it's like the wedding, you know, maybe you don't get to see the wedding, or maybe you want to see the baby that they have, or I don't know if it's, I'm just completely making this up, and I'm probably going to butcher this because I don't really read this genre, but if it's dystopian, maybe they want to see like the world healed, or I don't know, you know, but like if you read in your genre, you'll know the thing that they want most, because that's the thing that you will want most at the end of that book or that series. So.
And that must be fun. Is that fun to write that sort of stuff too? That it's because it's not
so fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, because, you know, I was completely free to just make it up. I know I just make stuff up all day long anyway, but it was in a different way, right? Because I wasn't so restricted to having to do particular story structure. And the other fun thing that I got to do is that I got to pull scenes in that were sort of referenced a couple of times in the books, but weren't ever seen. So then, you know, and then I got to add like a couple of scenes that were like really pivotal moments in the story, but from this character's perspective instead. And so you got to see other things that happened behind the scenes that have influenced stuff in the story that you don't necessarily know. So it's basically a giant Easter egg. That is one thing you can do. And of course, so the only downside to this type of reader magnet is that it's only useful for those people who've read the series, right? So you would also want a reader magnet that you could use for completely new to you readers. And in that case, you need something that's completely standalone.
One of my questions was about, you know, how do you keep the like writing craft part like not feeling like work? Is this one of the ways that you do that by doing these Easter eggs?
You mean in terms of just getting the words out?
Yeah, like because you're passionate about writing, but I suspect that, you know, it being your business, it can sometimes maybe feel like a slog. You just don't feel like writing today. Like how do you keep being excited about what you're doing?
That is such an interesting question. I think for me it is straddling two genres. So I'll do a nonfiction book, and then I will be desperate to write fiction, and then I'll write, you know, a fiction book or two fiction books, and I'll be desperate to write a nonfiction book because it's palate cleansing. But also for me, really, it is finding the genre that makes me giddy to read, and then writing in that genre. And honestly, like that doesn't always lead to the best financial decisions, but it does lead to me being the happiest. And ultimately, I did not quit a corporate day job to create another job for myself. I left in order to be happy and to write the things that make me happy. So, and then also, like, I try to write characters that I can swoon over. Oh, I'm like almost embarrassed to admit that, but I do, literally. I try to write the characters that I swoon over, right? So, you know.
I love that. I love that idea. You got to write it for yourself first, right?
Exactly. Confession time. Gosh, I'm actually blushing.
Blushing at your own imaginary characters. That must make the cover image stuff be fun. Like if you're using sort of like people on the covers and stuff, that must be a fun process too.
Yeah, I haven't. I'm yet to use cover people on covers, but yeah.
You just imagine them. Do you ever like sketch them out?
I have like I'm really visual, so I have like a Pinterest board, and then I always make my book one secret because there's like hot guys, hot women, hot everything on there. Everyone's beautiful, dripping with gorgeousness, you know. And yeah, so I'll have a little cheeky mood board. I'll have a little look, and
love that. Love
I just
that.
You know, you got to have fun with it, right?
Totally, totally. Richard did have a question about if you've ever changed up your book covers. Is that something that you look at?
I think so. I haven't, but I have just started to consider whether or not I should change up my nonfiction. The problem is they are really branded and recognizable because they all have very similar elements to them. So I'm a bit reluctant to change them, but I have considered it, especially because I've sort of diverged. Even though it's all nonfiction writing craft, I sort of have a character steps to, and then I have an anatomy. Like the book that I'm writing now is the anatomy of something that shall remain secret for right now.
Can you tell me off the air though?
Like, yeah, sure.
Okay, great. Want to know?
Such a mean move to do that.
Sorry.
No, it's fine. And then I think you have to know whether or not has your series in the past sold really well, right? If it sold really well in the past and it's not necessarily selling as well now, then maybe it's time to change up the covers. What is your market doing? Have the colors and the styles changed? So like in young adult, for example, for a while, it was all about symbols on the covers. Now, a lot of the indie books are people on the covers and it's like photo manipulation. So actually, if you used to have symbols on the covers, then maybe it's time to change that. But if it's not really selling very well and you want to write in a different genre, then I probably wouldn't bother, because it's a lot of money to invest in something that you're not necessarily going to be putting new content into. So for me, it's like, it's not just has the market shifted? It's a strategic business decision. Do I want to keep putting money into this particular genre? If yes, proceed to a designer.
Yeah.
If no, don't bother. Put the money into something else.
Yeah, like if your plan and your marketing plan that year are to like really push this particular series, then yeah, it totally makes sense. But just I think even doing it without then kind of maybe increasing your marketing, it might not be as effective. So yeah,
exactly.
That's good advice. What about your blurbs? Have you changed those up since you've been noticing this? Yeah.
Yes. So I did that very recently.
Ooh.
And yeah, so I basically went through and assessed a load of blurbs, and then took Brian Meeks's course. I read his book. I read Universal Fantasies. And I did the really, really hard job of trying to step back from a series that I wrote cross-genre and just try and pull on, okay, fine, let's forget genre. What are the universal fantasies in here? What are the tropes in here? And what can I lean into in order to make it more appealing what can I do to make it more appealing
to like one genre specifically, or like
sorry.
No worries. Take your time. Just rebelling somewhere.
No, sorry. It's because I'm in this co-working space, but I'm on my own in here. So they were just trying to tell me that I've got to leave a different way, basically.
Yeah, no worries. So you were looking at a series and hoping to just kind of pick out the one genre that you wanted to focus on for your blurb?
Yeah, kind of, yeah. And pulling out like so things like forbidden lovers, like that is a really common trope that people love. And I just hadn't even mentioned it in the blurb. And I was like, what are you doing? So there are things, yeah, like soulmates, forbidden lovers. There's like a mini love triangle in one of them. So there are these things that some people love and some people hate, but in putting them and seeding them into the blurb, I am making it easier for people to like know whether or not they would enjoy that book. Whereas the original blurbs were a bit more of like a synopsis, that common mistake that loads of new writers make. And so instead, now I'm not really telling people an awful lot. I'm putting one very big question. So like the new tagline is Eden has one question: who is her soulmate? And so like we start with one question, and that's the only thread that I put through the blurb, instead of having, you know, even though I thought I didn't have like all of this history and subplots and stuff in there, I really did, but it's only, you know, it does take a bit of time and learning to see how to write blurbs differently. So
I think it's hard too, because you're so in the book, right?
That's
you know
it.
all the aspects,
Exactly.
and you're like, I want to highlight this piece because that's a great scene, and I want to highlighting different stuff. But so maybe the answer to this question is to just read Theodore Taylor's book. But can you, like, what's kind of the main difference between a trope and a universal fantasy? Because they're very similar to me. Like,
I still don't really understand the difference, if I'm perfectly honest. I think, to me, the way that I am understanding it and have read it, and I could well be wrong, is that a trope is more of a plot device, in that it would be enemies to lovers or rivals to lovers, and that is almost, it almost has its own arc, or, you know, and then whereas a universal fantasy is a bit more of like a detail, so it's more granular. So it might be some of the ones that she talks about, and of course I've gone completely blank, would be like one bed, like, or like, yeah, one bed in a story. That is not an arc. It doesn't have a story attached to it, right? It's a small detail that's in one scene. I'm trying to think of literally
a lot of Disney examples, right, of the universal fantasies. Like, say for like the Beast, right? Like that seems like a trope, because that's sort of like enemies to lovers, but it's also I guess like a let's say, I was gonna say like a kidnap victim, but that makes Beauty and the Beast sound like a really, really devastating book. But you know what I mean? It's like there's different sort of fantasy elements there as well.
Yeah, I think so. And I think, honestly, it's a bit of a combination of the two. So, and this is why I like Jennifer Lynn Barnes's explanation as well, because she breaks it down into character tropes, places, details, and then there's one other that has just slipped out of my mind. But basically, she will litter her story, and the way she's talking about like writing for the id and these details is very similar to the universal fantasy idea. So, like, for example, things that I love, scenes set by a lake, or scenes on a train. Oh, bloody love trains. Sorry. Yeah, I really love trains. Like, and I love when scenes are set on trains as well. Or like the back to school party in a teen book where everybody goes to a party and it's like carnage and chaos. So like their little details, that's not really a trope. I think it's more of like a universal fantasy. Let's say, you know, Gossip Girl, everyone's really rich and they can afford loads of things, right? That's more of a universal fantasy than it is a trope, because you can't really, rich kids is not a story. You can't, there's no plot there, and no arc there. It's just a detail. So yeah, that is my best explanation. Like I say, I don't have a very crystal clear explanation of it, but I think it's brilliant anyway.
Yeah, no, I think that works. I want to try and find out what my train is. I haven't even thought about like what are aspects of books that I really enjoy. I'm like, yeah, I gotta find that.
Jennifer Lynn Barnes has recommends that everybody creates a list. So I am creating like a list of these 4 different things that I like really enjoy. I'm trying to think of other ones. So like,
had you thought about these before you tried to make the list? Like, I've never thought about this.
But now I'm seeing it everywhere. So like every time I read a book, I'm like, oh, so like I'm reading a book and it's set in a theme park, and I'm like, oh, I love that. So now our theme park's gone on my list. Or, you know, boy with bright blue eyes. Oh, love a boy with bright blue eyes, you know, or somebody like a girl wearing a leather jacket, or like a moody bad girl, like love that. You know, so like their character things or their like little details. I'm trying to think. So another little trick that I love is when that people use like text messages or emails in a book, and it's structured differently. I know that drives some people's bananas, but I love that. I think, you know, a little bit of difference, a little bit of something quirky in the story. Yeah, I love it. So like I've put that in my list as well.
Nice. You don't think that will date a book?
I think it depends how you do it. So like, for example, in the fantasy series that I have got, it's fantasy, so it's named something different. So I've kind of got away with it because it's not a phone or an email, but that's what it is. So I think you can be clever with it. And I don't know. Yes, maybe it will, but you know, we've had email for quite a few decades now. I don't think it's going anywhere quite yet.
Yeah, fair enough. I wanted to chat a little bit about the Alliance of Independent Authors, and I'm just wondering if you could tell us like what it is that you do there and like why an author should join, basically.
Yeah, so I manage their blog. So a lot of their content is either written by me or edited by me or commissioned by me or sort of pulled together by me on the website. And of course, they do have other people that contribute. So we have Dan, who does the news every week, and we have Howard, who runs podcasts, and John Doppler, who does often watchdog posts. But essentially, the best way I can describe it is like a union for authors. We don't really have a union as indie authors, but this is our union. And I say that because they do everything from high-level national campaigning on our behalf. So they lobby the governments. They will try to get law changes. They will lobby for better rights for us with distributors, and then they go down all the way down to providing content. So they run a self-publishing advice conference once or twice a year. They have the podcast, and they have beginner, advanced, and I don't know if it's called
super duper author.
Yeah. So they have a range of podcasts anyway, which is all free content. We have the blog where we often put out ultimate guide articles, which are in-depth articles on different parts of indie author life and marketing and publishing. And then they have things like discounts and deals, which you could, you know, it might be like 20% off a designer or 15% off an editor or free uploads for a paperback publisher or whatever. And yeah, so basically Ally is amazing. It's also a community as well. So we have like a Facebook forum, and then at London Book Fair, they are having a meet for all the indie authors, and then sometimes they also go to other ones across the world as well. I mean, obviously not for the last couple of years, but they have previously been in America and various other places. So yeah, and it is a very much a global organization, and we try very hard to keep that in mind when we are writing articles as well, not to just be UK centric or America centric or anywhere centric, to be perfectly honest. We do try to keep that in mind as much as possible.
Nice. No, I love Ally. I think it's great. I think one of the, especially for if you were a newbie author, the watchdog stuff, especially, just like having those trust ratings. Like we think about this a lot, that, you know, if you're trying to just say how to publish a book in your search engine, there's so many hits, and what's kind of legit and what isn't. There sadly is a lot of places that are looking to take advantage of people that just want to have a career as a writer.
Yeah, and the watchdog is more than just those posts as well. So we have ratings. I can't remember if you have to be a member to see them. I'm assuming you probably do, but they have like a rating system where they will rate like awards and like whether or not they can be trusted or they're a bit dodgy, and then likewise they have their approved partner list. So they have a list of author services providers that they have vetted personally. Every single person on that list has been vetted by Ally, and they have to meet a strict set of criteria. So you know that they are legit, essentially.
No, I love that. I think it's a really invaluable resource for writers. So if you haven't taken part in anything, you should definitely, I think Laura's just dropped in the website there, so go and check it out. So my last question, so Ally and KWL both turned 10 this year. So I wanted us to go back to 2012 for a second. Carly Rae Jepsen's "Call Me Maybe" is quickly becoming everyone's favorite song. It's on every radio. Pitch Perfect is released, and we all wanted to join a cappella groups. Gone Girl is the hot book of the season. So what were you doing, Sacha? Where in your career were you?
So I had left university. I was in 2012. Yeah. So I was just coming to the end of a fast track like corporate management scheme that I had done in the public sector. And I was sort of qualified in Prince 2 project management, and I was very miserable. I had discovered about 6 months into this course, this scheme, that I really wasn't meant to be I just wasn't meant to be told what to do by anybody else. Basically, it was the problem. I had an authority problem. Okay.
Are you a rebel? No.
I know, right? Everything makes sense now. And yeah,
Sasha, this is actually a therapy session. So it's not a live Q&A at all.
I was so naughty though. I was so I don't know how I kept my job for as long as I did. But they said they wanted creative people because they wanted to change stuff up. And then when they got creative people, I don't think they really wanted creative people after all. And I got married in 2012.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Well, congrats on 10 years.
Yeah, I know, right? I can't believe it. So we're gonna possibly try and hop over the water somewhere for our 10-year in August. But yeah, so we got married in August 2012. Can't believe that's a decade.
To Call Me Maybe, is that you walked down the aisle?
Do you know, I had a piece of Ludovico Einaudi, Primavera, and my friend and one of my bridesmaids' brothers or nephews was at music school. So he remixed a dubstep version of this piece of classical music, and we walked down the aisle and off the aisle to that. It was fantastic.
Oh, I love that. That sounds great.
Yeah.
Well, if you do hop over on this side, if you're up in Canada at all, give us a shout. We'd love to chat, meet up. Nice. Well, we're nearing the end here. Is there anything that we didn't cover that you would have liked to have talked about? Any last pieces of advice or anything for authors?
I don't know. I think the hardest lesson I've learned is that I've got to write the stuff that makes me happy in the genres that makes me happy, even if right now that might not be the best financial decision, because it just makes me happy. So, got to create the life that you really, really want. Don't just give yourself another job.
Yeah. And what's your publishing plan this year? What have you got coming up?
So I have book 3 on pre-order in that series, and then I have a little novella. I've got an anthology that's also on pre-order, so I've got 3 books on pre-order. And I am writing 2 now. So one is the first book in the sort of sapphic young adult section called The Scent of Death, and I am writing a non-fiction book called The Anatomy of yeah, that one. So yeah.
There's a comment here that I should do like the actor studio and ask Sacha, when you reach the pearly gates, what do you want God to write to you?
Oh,
it's a good question.
What that I was a winner. No, I say that because my number one strength is competition. I am actually being facetious. What do I want? Hopefully I wrote some books that changed the life of teenage queer teens and made them realize that who they are is beautiful.
Oh, I really love that. I think that's a great note to sort of finish up on. Thank you for taking the time to be with us. I really appreciate it, and looking forward to, like, not me personally, but our colleague Nick seeing you at LBF. Also, who's coming up on the Rebel Author podcast? I know we talked about the Tammy episode, which is amazing. Tammy Lebreck.
Yeah.
Who have you got? Can you tease some people?
Yes. So this week is Margot Wood. I think it's Margot Wood, or I think that was, I don't know. I can't even remember what day it is. So Margot Wood, and then we've got Maisie Eddings, who has just released A Brush with Love, and then Jessica Brody, which nobody knows. I haven't announced that one yet, but Jessica Brody is coming on the week after, I think. So yeah.
Oh, excellent. Secret announcement. Love that. See, that makes me feel like a winner because I'm also very competitive.
Yes, competition for the win.
Excellent. All right. Well, thanks, everyone. We'll be back soon in a couple of weeks with another live chat, and really appreciate the time and everyone's questions. So thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.